Hi, SASS listeners. Welcome back to another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SASS podcast. I'm your host, Dave Markel, coming to you from the Long Valley Studio in Washington, Utah. This is episode 165, and today's guest is someone you've heard from before, a voice that left a mark the first time she sat down with me. This time, though, she's choosing to remain anonymous. She'll be going by the alias Anne. And as you listen, you'll quickly understand why she asked to come back and why she needed that layer of protection. What brought her back to this microphone is important. It's personal, and it sheds light on a part of this process that most people, including many survivors, don't even realize exists. In today's conversation, Anne opens up about something deeply important, an element of her experience as a guest on this show that most people never even think about until they're sitting in that chair telling their story. She came back because she wants to help future guests understand the real weight, the power, and the after effects of sharing their truth on a platform like this. I'm not going to spell it all out here because Anne says it far better than I ever could, but I will say this: what she shares today matters. It's honest, it's insightful, and it's going to make a difference for any survivor who's ever wondered what it feels like to speak their story out loud. So, without further delay, let's get into it. Here's Anne. Hey, SASS listeners, welcome back to another episode. I am honored to have back in the studio with me someone who's actually been on this show before, but this time wants to remain anonymous, and she's going to go by the name Anne. And Anne has some really important information that she wants to share with all of my listeners. And she's going to be talking about her adult son, whose name we'll use Jake for referring to him. And then we'll refer to Anne's perpetrator as the offender or the perpetrator, or however she feels comfortable referring to that. But Anne, welcome back. I'm really glad that you're here. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me again. I don't want to say pleasure, but it is an honor. I am excited to share this message with the audience because I think it's an important one.
Yeah. Well,
so thank you.
And so my audience knows Anne reached out to me a few weeks ago, and we hadn't talked in quite a while, but it was an opportunity for her to bring me up to date on an issue that she felt was important enough to reach back out to me and say, hey, I'd like to do an episode to bring this issue to the attention of your listeners. And once she told me what this was about, I was all for it. I think it's a great learning opportunity and educational opportunity. So, and I'm not even going to ask you to go back into telling about yourself and things along those lines. I think we need to just focus in on what it was that you wanted to talk about so that we can help maintain your anonymity. And tell us about the experience that brought you back to this show.
I do want to go into a little bit of history because I think it's important just to lay the groundwork of why I did what I did, why I decided to go on the show. And I do think that the whole background is important. In my previous life, I wasn't allowed, right? Like in the abusive relationship, I wasn't allowed to say anything that was going on in our house, even just little stuff. It's just what happened behind closed doors was supposed to stay behind closed doors, and I would get in very big trouble if I said anything to anybody about anything outside. I live with those voices still. I live with the fear of, what is he gonna say if I do this? What would be his opinion if I made this decision? Down to little things, like even our kids. What if I sent them to this school? Or I'm always living with that voice in my head. And part of my decision to do the show was to take back my power, to take back my voice, to take back my decision. I knew it would upset him if I did it. And there was a fear of that, but shirking that, feeling it, and then throwing it off my shoulders was part of why I decided to come on and tell my story, because it is mine and my voice is mine and I can use it however I choose to use it. I also made the decision to not really consult with any of my loved ones. Not that it wasn't their business, but I didn't want any influence on what I was going to say. I wanted it to come out raw, and I wanted it to come out true and unfiltered. I didn't think that I could do that if I was worrying about relationships or someone else hearing it or whatever. I needed to put all that outside of my mind in order to have a very candid conversation. And I made those decisions thoughtfully and deliberately.
Well, and it worked because it was a great episode and you sounded empowered. I think that's what I'm hearing you say now, is that this was just an opportunity, as you used the words, to take back some power, some control over the situation. Because you're right, in those type of circumstances, domestic violence and rape, sexual assault within the domestic situation, you're talking about some very powerful power and control tactics. And somebody's telling you what you can and can't say and what you can and can't do outside of the walls of your house. That's a typical textbook power and control tactic. And I remember how powerful that was for you and how even scary it was to get out of that situation.
Very much so. And it still is scary. Even this is scary. But yeah, I think that decision was made to overcome some of that. And I do think that it was the right decision to come on the episode. And I'm not going to say that it wasn't. However, this brings us to why I wanted to come on this episode is there was some backlash. My adult son, we have a restraining order against my abuser, and we haven't talked to him. We left about 11 years ago, and we haven't talked to him since, other than him reaching out and trying to break the restraining order online a few times. But other than that, there's been no conversations. It's natural, I think, for kids to want to seek out their biological parents. I mean, I did it. I didn't live with my dad when I was young, and I sought him out in my adulthood. And I know how strong that draw is, how strong that desire is, or that hole in your heart can be. That is something that my son was dealing with, and he reached out to his dad and had a conversation with him. He said that it was good because both of them were able to get stuff off of their chests, but that my abuser is very pissed off at me for many reasons. He told me about the whole thing and it was fine, the conversation. And he didn't tell me about it. Happened like 5 months ago. He didn't tell me about the conversation until 5 months later. I listened. I tried to be understanding and didn't point any fingers. But at the end, I was, okay, you have every right to do what you did. And you have every right to process these feelings in whatever way you need to and take the time. And you don't have to hash it out with me. But I need to know if these things happen because I still have young kids. There's a safety risk. It's like you're poking the bear. I need to know when that happens because I need to watch out. I need to be on alert, right? And he said, well, to be fair, he was the only reason that I found out that you were on a podcast. And my whole heart shattered in that moment because I realized what that meant to him. My poor son was in this super vulnerable state, dealing with these awful, I don't even know how to explain it, but his heart is ripped open. And then his dad delivers this news about something that his mom did. And it derails the purpose of that interaction and brings in almost like a betrayal. Like now he's feeling betrayed by his mom. And his dad is using this betrayal against him and against me. And that sucks. That never, ever crossed my mind as something that could have happened. Even if I thought one day my son might come across this episode, which may or may not have come across my mind, then I can explain around it and I could then talk to him about it and deal with those repercussions. But I never thought that the delivery system would be through his dad. Then his dad used it to turn it back and say, this hurts me too much. I am the victim in this situation. She made me look bad. That type of stuff. My son is very bright. He is one of the most caring, kind, gentle, thoughtful, emotionally intelligent people I know. He didn't let that influence him in any way, which is great. It didn't destroy our relationship. So we're okay. It could have gone a lot worse, is what I'm trying to say. It could have gone awful.
Yeah.
But I think where I am is I just felt this tremendous guilt that I gave a tool to my abuser to hurt my son. And I know what you're going to say, that it's not your fault. You're going to say, don't beat yourself up. You couldn't have known, that type of stuff. But at the same time, if I could go back in time and do this differently, the armor that I would have prepared my kids with would have been different. I would have consulted with them first. I'd have still done it, but I think that my approach would have preserved the integrity of those relationships that are so important to me and so supportive to me. It would have prioritized those relationships over my pursuit of taking back my power, you know?
Yeah, I do know. I think what you're saying is critically important. And as an outsider observation to what it is that has so hurt you and made an impact on the relationship between you and your son is the realization that now in hindsight, you're saying, had I known this was going to happen, then I would have prepared my children differently. But as it is, I think one thing that's critically important to note is that you said things are fine between you and your son. I think a lot of that has to do with what you said before about who your son is and the type of personality your son is and how you raised him. He's obviously, from your description of him, adopted and made part of him a very empathic personality style. And instead of turning it against you and causing a rift between you and him, he's understanding of that, is the way I'm interpreting what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So even in your understanding of that, you have said, I would have still done it differently. Let's talk about that. What would you have done differently had you anticipated something like this happening?
I'd have checked in with them first. I started this saying, I deliberately didn't because I didn't want it to influence the story that was being shared, right?
Right.
But I think now, looking back, obviously hindsight's 2020, but I would have shared my intentions with them, given them the opportunity to say, please don't say these things. Or maybe they would have been, Mom, don't use real names. I could have done it anonymously. They weren't given the opportunity. It's their story too. It's their lives too. And they weren't given the opportunity to contribute to the way that this was done in any way. Or to say, this is how it's going to affect me. My son only wanted to know about it. He understands completely that I needed to do this. He supports that I did it. He just wishes that he would have known that it wasn't delivered to him in that way. And I completely understand that.
I'm wondering though, and
yeah.
let me interrupt. I'm
know.
wondering though if the intent of your abuser was to cause a rift and some anger and some negative impact between your son and you, obviously that wasn't accomplished. You're still on good terms with your son, but it rings to me of him still trying to have power and control over you by telling your son that you had done this podcast, him being the one to inform him and trying to cause harm that didn't occur. Hopefully that is some consolation in all of this. But at the same time, what has it done to the relationship between you and your son in terms of maybe making it better? Has there been any fallout that way?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I don't really think about it that way, but that is a great point because honestly, it's opened a communication pathway. Whereas before we wouldn't necessarily talk about this stuff. We don't bring up the past very often. They're like when his birthday comes up or the anniversary of us leaving, like every once in a while we'll just like have a little, hey, this is that day. We have these knowing glances and we hug, and it's so weird because the three of us, me and my two adult children, the other ones don't necessarily have memories, but my two adult children are the only three people in this world who experienced what we experienced, and we did it together. And they're the only ones who understand the PTSD, the sheer terror, the hunger, the isolation, the physical and mental pain, the anguish that we all endured together. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because we don't really talk about it. We just know. We just know, and we just hug, and we get through it. It has given me and my son more opportunity and a platform, I guess, on which to begin a conversation. And then it just kind of goes into the effects. And I've shared more with him since then too, because the other part of this is I've also been very deliberate with them as I'm raising them to not talk about the past, to not influence their interpretation of who and what their dad is. I wanted them to build and have their own interpretation of that situation and of him. I kept them apart because that was what was safe and what I needed to do. And I didn't need to give them any more fuel to hate him. They were there. They experienced what they experienced. I don't need to do that. I don't need to break him down. But I also experienced more than they did. A lot of stuff that they don't know. They're adults now. They're not growing. I'm not trying to instill fear in them or anything. And because of who my son is, we've been able to have some really great conversations. And I have been able to share a little bit more. I've been a little bit more open, less guarded. When I was guarded before, it was because I didn't want to influence them. Now I feel more like we're friends. He's still my son, and I'm still going to care for him always. I'll always take care of him, but he's an adult, and he is so capable of holding this and holding me. That's what it's done. It's, my son, he gives the best hugs.
I love that.
He gives the best, safe, big, gentle, giant hugs. It has allowed for me to share a little bit more, to break in front of him a little bit and not be so strong. It has definitely brought us a little bit closer.
And all of what you just said begs two questions in my mind, but I'll ask them one at a time. The first question is, do your children know that you're doing this episode?
My son, I did tell him for this reason, and I don't think my daughter would care very much. She didn't care about the first one. I'll tell her that I'm doing it, but with my son, I told him beforehand because I wanted to give him the opportunity to chime in, and he's like, okay, thanks. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Do you have anything you don't want me to say? Do you have any? He said, what are you going to say? So I gave him a little snippet, and I just that what the message was going to be, and he said, okay, that sounds fine.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think that's important. The audience would probably want to know, well, what have you done this time? So, but then the other question I have is, does Jake recognize that what his father did was to try and put a rift there, and that he was trying to use your being on a podcast as a negative thing towards both your abuser and Jake by not telling Jake? Does he see the harm that his father was trying to inflict?
Maybe. I'm not sure. I think he's juggling a lot of different emotions related to that conversation. And I mean, there's more to it than just that part. There was more that was used to try to cause a rift, not just the podcast. And so I think he does get that was the intention more than just this podcast. So whether he gets it with the podcast part, I'm not sure. He's very smart.
Yeah.
So
In your describing that, it sounds as though you're explaining to me and to the audience that the exposure of the fact that you are on a podcast isn't the issue. It's a part of the issue. Seems to me like there's some resentment on his part that there's even a restraining order to begin with, and that he wishes that there was some sort of retaliatory action he could take towards you. And letting Jake know that you'd been on a podcast was just one element of that retaliatory action.
Yeah. Yeah, using whatever, trying to take the power back in whatever form it comes, whatever string you can pull.
And to make himself look like the victim. Typical narcissistic mentality.
Yeah.
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 What's your message to my audience, then, if you could be succinct?
I don't have any other message other than just consider what it might do to your relationships. It's going to be individual. My experience is going to be different than other people's experience. Not everybody's going to have the same son that I have. It might destroy a relationship. But you know best what your relationships look like, what you hold dear. So just consider those things that you hold dear before making such a very permanent decision. I know you would take this down if I asked you to, but like you have said before, like when something goes up on the internet, it's forever. I would not change what I did. I still want it to be out there, and I still think that it's very important, but I just want for people to think fully. I didn't think fully before I did it. I didn't consider my relationships. I only considered that one relationship that I was trying to take my power back from.
Well,
so
I'm very thankful that it didn't destroy the relationship between you and your son. I'm even more thankful that it didn't affect you to the point where you regret having done the podcast, because I can tell you there have been several people who have reached out to me and talked about how powerful your episode was and how it impacted them in positive ways and influenced them for the better. And that's the whole purpose of the existence of this podcast, is to bring an effectual situation like that into people's lives. It's educational, it's empowering, it's relationship building also. I think, truth be told, even your abuser would probably, if pressed, say, yeah, that's pretty impressive that she did that, that you did something that courageous, that strong, that powerful. I don't know that this is changing the lives of abusers and perpetrators. I don't know that many abusers and perpetrators listen to this show, because it's probably pretty hard to take when they see themselves in these situations. But at the same time, these kinds of things can change abuser mindsets. I know it's happened. People can be awakened to their harm in other people's lives and make effectual changes. But I think what's more important is that my guests and listeners that haven't been guests, that are victims or survivors, and those who maybe have never been a victim, can recognize the power in this show. I already know they do, because I get so many emails and texts from people all the time saying what an impact, what a positive impact this show is on their lives. I don't take credit for that other than being the platform for that. I give my guests that credit, because it does. It takes a tremendous amount of courage to come on the show and do what my guests do. And even you right now, I think this is such a show of strength and power and courage to come on and say what you've said and help other past guests and future guests become aware of an important aspect of what it means to be on this show.
Yeah. I actually feel a little bit better. I was feeling guilty. The message was I was feeling guilty. And now I'm glad that you turned it around for me a little bit, because I am able to see the good that has come of it. Hardship can bring people together. And what better way to throw it back in my abuser's face, huh?
Well,
Look at us now.
yeah.
Closer than ever.
I'm gonna give a hooray to that. But at the same time, that's not really the intent. It's just a natural consequence of, like you said, taking back your power, of recognizing the strengths of relationships that exist outside of the relationship between you and your abuser. Because you're right, your children are just as much of victims and survivors of that life that they shared with him and still share with him, even if there is no contact, even if your son never reaches back out to his father. Maybe your daughter has or hasn't and may make a decision to or not to reach out to her father. These are dynamics that need to be talked about. And that's what this platform is all about, is normalizing these types of conversations, putting them out there in ways that people hadn't maybe thought of, and can then internalize other people's experiences and other people's words and comments. And as they meditate on them and think back on them, it can have really impressive results.
Yeah.
My audience doesn't see you because I don't put my video out, but I'll tell my audience, Anne is smiling almost ear to ear in reflecting on what she's just done and what this episode means. I think it's a really great episode. I can't thank you enough for having the courage to want to talk about this in this way. It's really good stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
That does it for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SASS podcast. Thank you for being here with me and with Anne today. Her willingness to come back under a new name with a new level of vulnerability speaks volumes about the weight of what survivors carry long after the recording stops. And I'm deeply grateful that she trusted this space enough to return and share that part of her journey with all of us. If you're listening today and you've ever thought about being a guest on this show, I want you to hear something very clearly. Nothing Anne shared was meant to frighten you away. Quite the opposite. She came back because she cares. She wanted you to understand the emotional terrain you might walk through, not so you'd avoid it, but so you can prepare for it, so you can walk into this space grounded, supported, and fully aware of the impact that speaking your truth can have on your mind, your heart, and your healing. This show was built to honor victims and survivors, to protect you, to give you a space where you can tell your story and be heard, believed, feel in control, and feel safe. Episodes like this one only make the process stronger, safer, and more empowering for every voice that joins us going forward. So, to Anne, thank you for your honesty, your courage, and your compassion for others who will one day sit in your seat. And to every listener who's walked through this with us today, thank you for being part of this community that believes, supports, and understands. It all contributes to normalizing the conversation and putting an end to rape culture and lowering the prevalence rate of rape and sexual assault. SASS listeners, if you're ready to share your survivor story in order to help yourself on your healing path or help someone else on theirs, please feel free to reach out to me so that we can talk about the possibility of you guesting on this show. My contact information is in the show notes for this episode, and I would be honored to hear from you. Thank you for being here. Be sure to tune in again next week for another powerful and meaningful episode. And one last thing, if you're ever the person that someone opens up to about their experience of being a victim or survivor of rape or sexual assault, please remember to start by believing. Because whether you're aware of it or not, we all know someone whose life has been impacted by rape or sexual assault. We'll see you next week.